Hi everyone, welcome. What you see here is my bin of mixed red worms, and it is now my oldest active system at 386 days of age. So it's certainly getting up there in age. I mean, 386 just happens to be the same age that I recently bought an end to one of my other now complete bins. But at 386 days of age, that was the day it was when I finally did the final haul out of worms from that system. Which means for a good month and a half or so prior to that, it had already been in the process of migrating the worms. And maybe even before that, there might have been a period of just foraging, just giving the worms a chance to dig through the material and eat what was remaining in there. And here, we're still treating this system as just an everyday, average, active composting barrel. Or bin. Barrel. How did I come up with the word barrel? I do have a barrel, but it's my composting barrel outside. This is clearly a bin. It's actually two bins, as you can see. One bin is a busted one resting within another one. And the reason they're doubled up like that is not only just to provide me with a handle, because the one that's actually housing the worms has a busted handle, but also because these are perforated bins. Both bins have a number of holes on the bottom, and I figured if I were to nest one perforated bin within the other, and then even put a plastic liner in between the two, then I could just treat it as a system that has no holes in it. And that's the way this is set up here. So I've got a nice assortment of delicious foods for these guys. Something you're going to see in here which you won't recognize from the last check-in is these pieces of pepper. I've recently gotten myself into the habit of coming down here each time a pepper gets consumed to knock off all the seeds, and I've been gathering up the seeds from not only peppers. Seeds are collecting up nicely here, but also cantaloupe. Here's my collection of cantaloupe, and I've also got the seeds out of another cantaloupe off on the side drying, because I went to the vegetable market yesterday, picked up a cantaloupe, and I've got the rinds from that cantaloupe in my freezer now, and I've even got the rinds from another cantaloupe that came prior. And as you saw, besides the cantaloupe, there's also coffee, as well as the filter in which that coffee is. So this feeding zone indicator coffee filter will just recycle it, and it'll become supplemental bedding down in the feeding zone. So this is the only system that I'm running this sort of horizontal wedge kind of pattern, and it's been actually set up this way from day one. Ever since these worms came out of their old home, which was a small little container, I dumped the contents into here and jammed it over into this direction, and then ever since then, only this side of the bin is getting replenished with fresh materials, always moving the old stuff over. And it was a couple check-ins ago that we finally did a harvest of the aged, finished compost over on this side. And I pretty much just took that stuff straight out to the garden, gave it to some of my plants, and I'm sure they were appreciative of it. And it's because of this stuff not needing any sort of real protection from drying that plastic covering that you saw was only over here. And what a difference, right? I mean, over here we've just got semi-dry material, probably completely devoid of worms. I would almost guarantee that it's completely devoid of worms, because even when we did our harvest of material out of this a few check-ins ago, we saw no worms in what we pulled out, which was about this much material, but we kept exploring, and we saw almost an equal amount of material in which there were pretty much no worms. So that stuff all got moved over here, and then the active feeding zone got pushed over here into the middle, where there was still a good bit of work to be done on the remaining materials that were in the stuff. So there were materials like leftover bedding bits, maybe some food scraps. And that's the stuff that I'm curious of over here. Still see a few worms hanging out over in this stuff. We did try to position the plastic cover in such a way that this stuff would be protected from drying to help motivate the worms to remain active in this material and help break it down to the point where it too can be seen as finished compost, and it's definitely getting there. I do see a worm or two hanging out in this stuff, which is cool. But I guess the relatively low number of worms is possibly a sign that this material too is almost on the verge of being harvestable and finished for the most part. I guess one thing that stood in my mind was how even the stuff that we hauled out of here, the castings that we did harvest a few check-ins ago, still had a little bit of material in it, so I did find myself picking through it here and there, just removing little scraps of this and that. But you know, this stuff goes straight into my garden. It's not like I'm trying to sell it or anything, so I don't worry so much about the fineness of it. If I was putting this stuff into bags and trying to sell it on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or something like that, I would certainly only sell the stuff that's been pretty much screened clear of any sort of residue or residual castings particle matter. But it's for personal use, and if there's still a little bit of organic matter remaining in my castings, I'm fine with that. So my assumption is that, I guess, right around here is where we're going to start to break into the section of the bin where we loaded fresh bedding, fresh food, because we did want to, I guess I did want to kind of increase the space in which they're actively working. So I did move a lot of this finished stuff over quite a way. So everything over here I would assume is where the active composting is happening. I think that the most recent feeding, you can almost tell just from the look of it, because there's still some residual bedding material out on the surface. So that stuff still has some leftover scraps of shredded paper and cardboard in it. This stuff over here is also really getting to that point where it's pretty heavily worked. Still little bits of this and that remaining in it, as well as a good number of worms in it, continuing to work it down, which is nice to see. But I would imagine that it too is going to be kind of close to being harvestable soon. And I was actually thinking that it might be nice at some point soon to bring this system to an end. I mean, at 386 days of age, we're only 2 weeks away from the system reaching 400 days old. And even though we could probably just keep this going this way, almost perpetually, I guess, if we were to just harvest more castings out of here, probably half the bin could come out as harvestable castings. We could once again move over the almost finished stuff and continue piling in new fresh bedding for these little guys and keep them going in this sort of continuous flow format or wedge format. But I've been really wanting to, get these little guys upgraded into a slightly larger container one of these days. It seems like they're due for it, because the reason they even ended up in this container originally was because they had outgrown their old container. Like I mentioned earlier, they used to live in a container which was perhaps this size, and that was because they didn't need anything bigger. This population started out as only a couple dozen worms, and then after a certain period of time, it seemed like they had outgrown the little container that they were living in. They got moved into here, and they've since, I think, grown even more in size, population size that is. So I think it would be nice to get them into a somewhat larger container and then get these 2 perforated bins out of service, because I don't know, I definitely like the idea of getting these little guys into a somewhat larger space, and in a larger space they would tend to even further increase their numbers, which would also be nice to see. The one thing I'd like to see the numbers reduced in is the springtail population living in here. The springtails are alive and well in here. And you know what? I am such an airhead. I even put my my BTI mosquito dunks solution out here, because my intention was, before touching anything in here and disturbing the top surface, I wanted to come in with this stuff and treat the top surface, because here and there I do see a couple, maybe gnats, fruit flies, whatever they are. I don't even know what they are, but some sort of flying insects appear to have come and made themselves at home within this system. So I've been coming in here every few days and just lifting off the covers and giving this stuff a spritz, because when you want to try to apply this stuff, you're after their larvae, trying to prevent the larvae from maturing into adult flies. And you have to assume that they're living in the top, perhaps inch, if not less, material. So they're not going to go down deep. They're going to be right there on the surface. And if you want to hit your target with this stuff, you got to, get them on the surface. But I've since tilled everything up here and disturbed everything, so we're kind of beyond that point in time when we had the opportunity to treat them where they live. I did see one or two flying insects buzzing around in the very beginning. We might have scared them away, so hopefully, the past few weeks since I've been applying this stuff, maybe it's making progress. I'd like to think so. But for whatever reason, I just seem to space out on applying that stuff at the right time. So we've made ourselves a little bit more room here into which we can pile in today's feeding. And I think it was probably a good idea over the past few check-ins to really move the finished stuff over and expand the space that we're giving these guys to work, as well as the placement of the plastic covering that's been on here for a few check-ins now. I think that's helping a lot too, because the material looks really nice. When you come in here, you could see it's got castings all over the top surface, worms coming out to the top to hang out and bask in the moisture that's recirculating beneath the plastic. So I think it's definitely beneficial. So we've got a replacement feeding zone indicator we could place out here on top when we're done. So why don't we also bring in the old one, the one that had been doing that up until now, and get that down into the feeding zone, as well as supplementary bedding material that they can nibble on. As soon as we put a bunch of delicious food on top of that, they're gonna do away with that piece of paper 1, 2, 3, if you ask me. I took this stuff out of the freezer a little while ago, so it's starting to thaw, and it is a pretty generous amount. I mean, besides the cantaloupe that I carved up yesterday, I already had a supply of cantaloupe rinds in my freezer. So this is really, I guess, a combination of both. I didn't really deplete everything that was from yesterday's cantaloupe, because that's the stuff that I chopped up into little tiny bits like this. Some of these larger chunks are probably, yeah, they're from the previous cantaloupe. So if you ask me, that is a fairly generous feeding. I'm attempting to arrange stuff so that none of it peeks out through the top surface. I mean, I don't want to continue, broadcasting the dinner bell, trying to invite more and more flying insects to make themselves at home in this system. And when you got a delicious food like cantaloupe in your system, any sort of passerby flying insects, not to say that my basement is, got a lot of that going on, but still, they sneak in and they seem to zero in on the good stuff. So if it's possible, I want to try to mask anything that's going on here, so that any curious creatures that might want to stop in and take advantage of that as a potential meal opportunity don't even realize it's there. So I think the other thing that would help also mask the scent of the delicious foods is the coffee. So that stuff going in right on top is also, I believe, a pretty good way to kind of keep the smell down within the system and not let the curious flying insects realize what's going on over there. And before we put the feeding zone indicator on here, let's see what else we have. Usually I'll include a little bit of grit. This is pulverized eggshell. with my feedings. We'll put in a little bit of my worm chow too. And then just a little bit more of my bedding as just sort of a top coating for the feeding zone. It's probably not a bad idea to just build this up a little bit so it mounds up a little bit higher than the rest of the surrounding material, because it's going to settle, it's going to collapse, and then as the worms deplete the stuff, it's also going to further settle. So even though it might be higher than the surrounding materials at the present time, by the time we get in here next time, it'll, probably be significantly lower. And it does seem like we've fed them a little bit more than we usually do, but I think that's fair because there are a lot of worms in here. Their population just seems to keep growing, and as we keep giving them more space to live in, I believe they'll continue doing that. And it gives us all the more reason to start thinking about getting them into a somewhat larger home. So this piece of top covering paper, ever since we've been running this piece of plastic on top, has been getting worked pretty thoroughly, as you can see. I'm even wondering if we might be able to just fold it over so there's no holes remaining. I still like the idea of the whole top surface being covered, but there's a little bit to spare here on the ends. And then we'll come back on with the plastic to keep promoting the recirculation of moisture over here above the feeding area. And just continuing to allow the finished castings end to further dry and become such that we can at some point scoop the castings out. And I'm not even sure if that's going to become the next step. The next step might actually be to just haul out what's in here and sort of consider what's happening here in terms of this wedge setup or this continuous flow setup as possibly being just a migration of the worms in progress, and then treating this as the horizontal migration feeding zone, hauling them out into a new home, and then bringing this system to an end. That's really what I was kind of thinking of. So there's a pretty good likelihood that the next time we're back in here is going to be 14 days from now on the system's 400th day in service, at which point we might do just that. But I still need to decide. I'm not 100% on that, so we shall see. So let me take care of getting the system put away. I've got a few things I got to take care of getting cleaned up, but that's all boring. I'm not going to keep you around for that. Before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's real appreciated as well. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.